The joke began before I even sat down. I could see it in the way my coworkers whispered behind their coffee mugs, in the stifled laughter that followed me across the office hallway. They thought they were clever. They thought they had planned the perfect prank. They set me up on a blind date with a deaf woman, expecting awkward silence, embarrassment, and a story they could laugh about for weeks. But the moment I sat across from her and raised my hands to greet her in sign language, the entire joke collapsed into something none of them ever imagined. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of understanding others, take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who believes in humanity, and subscribe to the channel Ripple of Kindness. Stories like this remind us how powerful simple kindness can be. The cafe was warm and quiet, sunlight pouring through the glass windows and settling across the small table between us. She sat there in a red sweater, her posture straight but slightly guarded, her hands folded around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched yet. There was something in her expression, a mixture of caution and quiet dignity, that made the whole moment feel heavier than a typical blind date. I already knew why. My coworkers had made sure to tell me, laughing as they did, that she couldn't hear a word I said. They expected confusion, maybe frustration. They expected me to struggle through awkward notes on napkins or simply walk out. Instead, I lifted my hands and signed a simple greeting. The effect was immediate. Her eyes widened, the guarded tension in her shoulders melting into pure surprise. For a moment, she didn't move at all, as if she wasn't sure what she had just seen. Then slowly, almost carefully, she raised her hands and responded. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was alive. Her name was Emma. She told me she had lost her hearing when she was 7 after a severe illness. Growing up, she had learned to navigate a world that rarely slowed down long enough to understand her. Most people treated her with polite distance. Some avoided her completely because communication felt like too much effort. But the cruelest experiences, she admitted, were the ones where people treated her like a joke. Like this setup. She had almost canceled the date when she found out it was arranged by coworkers. She assumed it was another situation where someone wanted a story to laugh about later. Still, she came, maybe out of stubborn hope that this time might be different. What she didn't expect was someone signing back. I hadn't learned sign language for any heroic reason. Years earlier, my younger cousin had been born deaf, and my aunt struggled to communicate with him. I started learning basic sign language just so he wouldn't feel alone during family gatherings. What began as a simple effort to connect slowly became something I cared deeply about. But sitting there across from Emma, I realized something strange and powerful. The skill I had learned quietly, almost accidentally, had just turned someone's cruel joke into a moment of genuine connection. As the conversation flowed through silent gestures and expressions, the cafe around us faded into the background. Emma's laughter didn't make a sound, but it filled the space between us more loudly than any noise could. Her eyes sparkled when she talked about her work as a graphic designer, about the way she saw the world through shapes and colors rather than sounds. She described silence not as emptiness, but as a different kind of awareness. She noticed small details people often ignored, the rhythm of footsteps on the floor, the vibration of passing buses, the way sunlight shifted across walls during the afternoon. Listening to her story through the graceful language of moving hands, I realized something uncomfortable about the world I lived in. People often assume that someone who is different is somehow lacking. But Emma wasn't lacking anything. If anything, she seemed to understand the world more deeply than most people I knew. Hours passed without us noticing. Coffee turned cold, sunlight faded into the orange glow of evening, and the cafe slowly emptied. Every gesture between us felt natural, like a quiet dance of communication that didn't require a single spoken word. At one point, Emma paused, studying my face with an expression that was both curious and thoughtful. She signed slowly, almost carefully. Why did you learn this? The question lingered in the air between us. When I explained about my cousin, she smiled in a way that felt both warm and sad. She told me many people promised to learn sign language to communicate with deaf friends or family members, but very few actually followed through. The fact that I had taken the time meant more to her than she could easily explain. For the first time that evening, I remembered the coworkers who had arranged this whole situation. I imagined them waiting eagerly for a disaster story, expecting awkwardness and humiliation. Instead, they had accidentally created one of the most meaningful evenings of my life. And something told me it meant just as much to Emma. Before we continue to the ending, I have a special request for you. If this story is already touching your heart, write "Kindness Matters" in the comments below. It helps spread positivity and lets others know they're not alone in believing that compassion can change lives. When the cafe finally closed, we stepped outside into the cool night air. The city buzzed with distant traffic and flashing lights, but around us everything felt strangely peaceful. Emma looked at me for a long moment before signing something that caught me completely off guard. She said this was the first blind date she had ever enjoyed. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Walking away from that cafe, I realized the joke had failed in the most beautiful